Welcome to Weekly Homilies with Father Mark Sislenko, pastor of Saints Isidore and Maria Parish in Glastonbury, Connecticut. We are part of the Catholic Archdiocese of Hartford. I'm Carol Vassar, Parish Director of Communications, and you are listening to Season 4, Episode 4, for the Nativity of the Lord, Christmas, December 25th, 2020. Our Gospel reading is from Luke, chapter 2, verses 1 through 14. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that the whole world should be enrolled. This was the first enrollment when Quirinius was governor of Syria. So all went to be enrolled, each to his own town. And Joseph too went up from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David that is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and family of David, to be enrolled with Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. While they were there, the time came for her to have her child, and she gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them at the inn. Now there were shepherds in that region living in the fields and keeping the night watch over their flock. The angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were struck with great fear. The angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. For behold, I proclaim to you good news of great joy that will be for all the people. For today in the city of David a Savior has been born for you, who is Christ and Lord." The Gospel of the Lord.
A couple of years ago, I had a conversation with someone who posed the question of what would it look like if Jesus came now rather than 2,000 years ago. Whether God chose to become one like us in our own time, how would that look differently, given all of the advances in technology and where we find ourselves to be today? It's an interesting question to kind of ponder. And when you begin to do that, you begin to realize a few things about this event we celebrate today. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. If Jesus were physically here in our time. As I ponder that, I can say to you this: Jesus is physically present here, now, and in our time. Not just spiritually, but Jesus is physically present. Now, before you come to the conclusion that I've totally lost my marbles, let me explain how. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Mary, a simple woman, said yes to an incredible thing and opened herself up to be the Mother of God. And through her willingness, through her sacred yes, God was born in and through her. The Word became flesh in and through her. As believers who are gathered here today, because of our faith in that simple but yet profound event, also are called to give birth to Christ in the simplicity of our own lives. We are called to that same yes, to the same affirmation, to allow the Word, God's powerful Word, to enter our lives, our hearts, our souls, so that we can then be transformed into the very image of God. And so, yes, Jesus is physically among us, in you and I and all believers who have that same charge to live their lives, to fashion their lives in the image of God. Isn't that truly what happens to us in the Eucharist? As we gather and receive the very body and blood of Christ, we take God within, not just for our own benefit, but to be transformed and refashioned and made into the very thing we consume, the very person we consume, the one we consume, so that our lives begin to mirror and reflect less of ourselves and more of God. And that the gospel, God's vision for humanity, is promoted and lived through us. Through us. Now, we all understand our responsibility to live the gospel. And in that context, to give birth to Christ ourselves makes sense. But we struggle. We struggle in this world. And to put it quite simply, we struggle between the Caesar and God. Caesar and God. We are raised and we live in a very secular world. All of our principles, the way we structure our lives, reflect our secular and corporate agendas. We learn how to navigate through our lives. And then if we stumble upon faith, that's something that is brought to our everyday workings. But truly it is for the believer. How does one balance the secular and the sacred, the human and the divine, in the particulars of my everyday living? How does the gospel, how does my faith find its way into the other stuff of the world? The Caesar and God. And as we begin to ponder God's way, the gospel way, we see something different opening up. We ponder this event of the incarnation, God becoming one like us in Jesus Christ, of what it did to change human history. Because what we celebrate today really has less to do with a baby and more to do with the magnificent power of God busting through humanity and sending us a very profound message. And that profound message is that humanity is worthy of God. We are not extra add-ons. We are not off to the side. We are not second guesses. But we are worthy to be a vessel of God. We are worthy to receive God, to make a home for God. And when we begin to see the powerful impact of the incarnation and what it says about us as human beings, the axis of our lives switches. It changes. Our perception changes. It becomes less about I and me and more about we and us. Humanity is viewed in a much different fashion, a fashion that is based more on inclusion rather than division, justice and peace rather than discord and disarray. When this axis changes and we put that lens on, then as we go into the other business of our lives, we see all of it differently. It can no longer be just what is profitable to me, but what is best for us. It takes a lot to balance the secular and the sacred, the human and the divine. We see it perfectly in Jesus Christ, so we have a lot to learn from what God did 2,000 years ago. Humanity was blessed. And as we struggle to live out our lives of faith and find that balance in our lives, we can also begin to realize that God's way is based on some very simple but yet solid principles. It is based on a foundation of three important virtues that become the sole axis of life itself: faith, hope, and love. Faith, hope, and love is the foundation of God's way. So if our daily lives could reflect more fully those three virtues of faith, hope, and love, if they could get into how we conduct business, how we interact with our brothers and sisters throughout the world, then we will find ourselves serving the gospel more fully and embracing justice and peace with greater depth. So for ourselves today, as we ponder God's love for humanity, we find ourselves getting caught up in awe of what God has done. Christmas is really about God loving human beings, God's love for each one of us. And it's also about realizing that we are part of something that is wonderfully good and holy. I know that life can be very difficult and challenging at times. The pieces of our puzzles don't always come together as we would like or hope. But when we stop and we think about the bigger picture of who we are, this very simple event, this holy night we celebrate, tells us that we are loved and part of something wonderfully good and holy. How that changes up how we see ourselves, how we think about ourselves, how we feel about ourselves. There are times in our lives when we meet those moments when life clicks, when everything makes sense, and we touch something that stretches us beyond ourselves. We touch the wonderfully good, and we touch the holy. And so my prayer for you this Christmas, tonight, tomorrow, and in the days and weeks ahead, that somehow, some way, maybe through some simple moment that catches you unawares, you will touch that moment where you realize that you are loved, that you are part of something wonderfully good and holy. Merry Christmas.
Father Mark Sislenko is the pastor of Saints Isidore and Maria Parish in Glastonbury, Connecticut. Learn more about our parish community at isidoreandmaria.org and follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our music comes free of charge from Blue Dot Sessions in Fall River, Massachusetts. I'm Carol Vassar. Thanks for listening.